Welcome. The session will be recorded. It will be split into two halves. The first half is going to be a lot of our side explaining the process of applying for a PhD with some specifics about Essex as well. And then halfway through, we'll stop the recording so that the Q&A and discussion side of it isn't recorded, so that you guys can be as free and open to talk and discuss. If any of the attendees or registrants have any questions along the way, there is a Q&A or there's the chat option, or you can raise your hand during the discussion section and I can give you sort of rights to talk and we can have a discussion in that part as well. I think one thing to bear in mind is that the purpose of today is to give as much general information as possible about applying for a PhD and what it's like. But obviously here we're all from the University of Essex, so part of it will be specific to Essex. Just be aware that if there's something that is particularly interesting to you, other universities will run similar programs and centres and hubs and things. So it's worth reaching out to the university that you're thinking about applying to, just to clarify what they have. And then if they don't have something similar and what we do here sounds really interesting to you, that might factor into your decision of where you apply for a PhD. So on that basis, thank you so much, everybody, for coming here today. And I'm going to hand over to Theodore and Morris, who are the co-directors for Essex Constitutional and Administrative Justice Initiative.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I don't know, Morris, would you like to start us off?
Well, okay. Rebecca, thanks ever so much again. And Theodore also. Well, I'm Morris Sunkin. I'm a Professor of Public Law and Socio-Legal Studies at the University of Essex, and I've been here since the 1990s. And I'm involved with Theodore in directing the Constitutional Administrative Justice Initiative, or sometimes we call it CAJI, or Essex CAJI. But essentially what this is concerned with is a broad field of scholarship and writing to do with constitutional law and administrative justice issues and public law across quite a broad spectrum. My own interests are specifically in areas like judicial review, how the judicial review system is used, who's using it, how the operation of the process operates, what impact judicial review has on government and public bodies. And I'm also interested in sort of broader issues of administrative justice. And we strongly encourage and support PhDs across that whole spectrum of areas within under that umbrella. So, I mean, that's really what I'm interested in. And I think Theodore has a wider range of interests. He may want to say something about his work as well.
Thanks a lot, Morris. May I just add that Essex CAJI was launched in 2022, but there's a history to it, as it previously was the UK Administrative Justice Centre, and it was funded by Nuffield Foundation. So it's been about almost like 10 years that research on administrative justice has been going on in Essex, in that sort of iteration, of a hub, a centre, and in terms of our transition to Essex CAJI, as Morris said, we are there's a greater number of colleagues nowadays working on issues of administrative justice, but also on constitutional justice. And there's also quite a few colleagues are working on the regional and international dimension of constitutional and administrative law issues regarding implementation of international law, institutional dynamics. We also have colleagues working on the role of AI, on democracy, on democratic principles and values. And colleagues working on constituent power, the rule of law. So there's a wide range of interest around the public law and in particular constitutional and administrative justice. And all that takes place at Essex within the broader research ethos, which is primarily on social justice and human rights. And I can go just a little bit around and some of our key activities and what we do as CAJI, and that might be of interest to prospective PhD students because they are part of the life of CAJI. So it's very inclusive research hub. So we've hosted a number of workshops on topics like a roadmap on administrative justice issues, on the constitution and the conduct of UK foreign affairs, on constitutional issues regarding the principle of parity of esteem in Northern Ireland. We also had workshops on the principle of solidarity as a principle of EU constitutional law. So quite a diversity of themes and topics. But we are also really interested in how we conduct research in public law. So we also had a couple of events looking at the methodologies we are using. What kind of methodologies are available to us as lawyers? How can we sort of transcend our disciplinary boundaries by bringing insights from political philosophy, empirical research, and so on. And we are quite international in terms of our approach, and there's also events that involve PhD students from other universities as well. We had joint events with the University of Antwerp, and we also have partnerships with other universities in the field of public law, in particular, for instance, the University of Lisbon, Sorbonne, and Ottawa, that they're also quite strong in public law, not to mention a number of other institutions like the Law Society, Ministry of Justice, and a number of law firms specializing in public law in particular. Maybe I could just finish off by saying that we have an enhanced digital presence via essexcaji.org. Some of you may be aware, and this is where we produce blog posts, podcasts. We publish our annual review, and we also advertise very often postgraduate opportunities with regard to funding for PhDs or events such as the one we're having today. So probably without further ado, I'll probably pass on to Joel, and I mean, I forgot to mention what my interests are, but I'm also a public lawyer. My interest is in constitutional law, constitutional justice, and the impact of EU law, especially on the member states, how they implement it, what are the issues there in terms of separation of powers, rule of law, and so on. So over to you, Joel, and thank you so much again.
Thanks, thanks very much. Theodore, my name is Joel Colon Rios. I think I'm Rebecca. Is it me now, or is it?
I think we'll give Tatjana the general PGR rep, what it's like being a PhD, and then we'll come back to you for the process, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yes.
Perfect. So I'll pass over Tatjana, who is one of my fellow PhD students here at the university, who's going to talk a little bit about what it's like to be doing a PhD, but also Tatjana is one of our PGR reps. So she's sort of fighting our corner on things that need to be fought and organizing excellent things for us to be involved in. So Tatjana, I'll pass over to you for about 10 minutes.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, I'm super happy to be here. And as Rebecca already said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the PhD experience in general, which I should say at first is super individual. So whatever I say, it might be different for you, but I do think that there are maybe some general common themes that might be helpful to kind of like just have an idea of beforehand. So maybe 2 words about me. I'm a second-year PhD student. My research interests lie actually quite far away from constitutional law in some way. I'm doing international humanitarian law and human rights law. And as Rebecca said, I am together with Matteo, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, PGR representative, so to say. I'll come back to that in a second, but first, yeah, let me talk about the PhD experience. And again, it's probably very difficult to kind of generalize it, but I think I would kind of describe it as basically when you're embarking on your PhD journey, it is like you're starting a self-employed research project. So you have your own project, it's your little baby, and you're the one who has to drive it forward, who has to make all the executive decisions. There's no manager to tell you, here's what you need to do next, or like, here's how to spend your time. There are two people here at Essex usually who give you advice. Those are your supervisors. And you will meet with them once per month, and they will give you feedback, and they will maybe, you know, give you tips. And if you have questions, they will give their kind of like answers or views on that. But in the end, you're in charge, which is beautiful and daunting at the same time. So I think, yeah, that's one of the things to kind of be aware of. You'll really be your own boss with all the advantages and disadvantages that that brings. It's also a long process. So 3 years, I think, is kind of the idea. You know, if we're talking very beginning to submitting like a first somewhat submittable draft of the whole thesis, sometimes it takes a bit longer. But let me just say, you'll have to spend 3 to 4 years with one topic. And I sometimes describe it as a relationship. So, you know, if you feel like you might not be able to spend 3 to 4 years with that topic because you'll be annoyed by each other, or you will be annoyed with that topic after like 2 years, you know, that's something to think about. Because again, it's really like you're spending every day with your topic almost. So yeah, this again, it's beautiful. Because you'll get to know your topic super well and be an expert on it in the end. But it is a little bit like a marathon. So it takes kind of endurance and not kind of giving up, because there will always be challenges. But I think the great thing is that although in the end you're the one in charge, you're never alone. So maybe let me talk a little bit about kind of the PhD community here at Essex. So we have a PhD office, which is lovely because that means that if you want, you can come in and you'll have usually like 4 to 6 people who are also working, who'll be working on different projects, which is super interesting because you'll get to hear about things that, you know, you haven't heard about before. And most importantly, you'll get to have lunch with people every day. If you want to, coffee, you can rant about all the struggles that you have. We do that quite a lot in the PhD office. And it helps. It's really great. So it's wonderful to have that community. And that's why I would say people very often say a PhD is lonely. And I think it can be because, again, you're kind of alone with your topic, but you're not alone with that general kind of journey. So that's something that's, I think, really important to remember. Apart from that, you also here at Essex will have a module in your first year. I think maybe Joelle will mention it also, kind of like centering on research methodology. So you also meet your fellow PhD colleagues from your cohort in that module. You will also present probably at a conference at the end of the year, which is only for PhD students. So that's also really nice and a wonderful opportunity to meet people and hear about other people's topics. Apart from that, Matteo and I have organized this year, together with the Human Rights Center, a doctoral affiliates network seminar series. So every second week, usually we get together and we discuss a topic or people present their work. So this is also a wonderful opportunity to kind of get feedback on your work, but also just to interact with each other. And apart from that, we also have things that have nothing to do with academia. For instance, today we're having a little Christmas social in the PhD office. So there's stuff like that going on. And I think the bottom line of this is just to say, PhD is challenging. A PhD can be, yeah, really kind of testing. But what I personally really appreciate about Essex is that with all these challenges, you're never really alone, and there are always people around to talk and to support, obviously on the academic side, but also on kind of the PhD side. And we have our nice little community. And apart from that, and then I think, I'm not sure where I am with time, but kind of on 2 closing remarks. You also have all of the student unions activities. There are a lot of them, a lot of socials, a lot of societies like clubs you can get involved in. And then also one last thing to mention, if you're interested in lecturing, usually there are, I mean, again, it depends on the year, but it is possible to sometimes to become an assistant lecturer, and then you will be working in a team and you'll have that sort of support. So there again, you'll be integrated kind of in a structure and interact with people. So yeah, this is, I think, all that I have from my side for now. I hope that helps.
You know, Tatjana, that's great. Thank you. And I have to agree, it's like it's the most challenging process ever. And that the fact of how challenging it is makes it really rewarding and really terrifying at the same time. It's a really bizarre thing. Thank you so much, Tatjana. So I'm going to pass over to Joelle to talk a little bit more about the process of applying for a PhD and putting together a proposal.
Thanks very much. Rebecca, should I note Anastasia is here, and I thought she was going to
I'm fine either way. I'm fine either way with the order, so as you wish.
Yeah, I mean, Anastasia, if you want to go first, because I think we're also waiting for Katia, but I think she's signing in at about 10 to. So if you want to go ahead and have a chat about what's happening on campus for PhDs, that's grand.
Yeah, of course. Hi everyone. My name is Anastasia. I'm the Deputy Director of Research here at the school, overseeing what we call our research environment. Welcome to this presentation. So I'll just take a few minutes to talk about what is happening in the school in terms of research, which includes opportunities for all of our PhD students to be included, to test their research, to get inspired by others, and also to disseminate their research as they progress in their PhD studies. So just to give you an idea of how research is, let's say, structured in our school, we have a number of what we call research clusters within our school. These are clusters of colleagues working on similar topics or on similar themes who get together to present their work, to exchange ideas, to work together on funding applications. So perhaps of most interest to those of you who are on this call is the public law cluster. But we also have related clusters like the human rights law cluster, socio-legal studies cluster. We have a private and business law cluster, criminal justice cluster, health law, law and technology, law and theory, international law, and European Union law. So because we are such a big school, there are plenty of these subgroups where each of us can find a corner or a platform, more like it, for presenting, promoting our research, testing our research in the school. And PhD students are always welcomed and encouraged to find the cluster that they are most interested in and come along to our events. And also just to say, these are not meant to be silos, so they're not meant to operate as standalone clusters or not meant to operate as clusters where you can only join one and not others. Invitations are circulated frequently in our emailing list, so we all know what is happening in the various clusters, and everyone is very welcome to join any cluster that they want. Clusters often also host external speakers, not so from outside our school, who may present an article of theirs or a book or an idea. So it is really a dedicated time for us to come together as a team, including our PhD community, and exchange our research ideas about our research activities. The other thing I'd like to mention is that in addition to these research clusters, we have bigger formalized research networks. We call them interdisciplinary research networks that are run by colleagues from the School of Law and which provide the opportunity for multidisciplinary work across the university, within the school, and with external partners. These include hubs like the Essex Armed Conflict and Crisis Hub, the Law, Business and Technology Interdisciplinary Hub, the Essex Transitional Justice Network, the Human Rights Center, and of course, the Constitutional Administrative Justice Initiative, who is organizing this event today. The research that is taking place within our school comes from various different disciplines, comes from various different people at different stages in their career. We are very open to identifying common themes, to identifying opportunities to work together. And in the same way as we operate an open door policy with our undergraduate and LLM students, if I may say so, we operate the same for the PhD students. So our PhD community knows that our door is always open to discuss and provide feedback. And as I said, they're always welcome to join all of the research activities that are taking place in the school. If I may add just the link to the chat to our Essex Law Research blog. It is the blog that provides visibility to pieces that are written by colleagues within the school. It is a good opportunity to put something out there. So this includes our PhD students, if they have something that's something short, like a piece that they want to promote, where they want to promote the research, if they are writing an article in parallel to their thesis, this is a good forum to gain some visibility. So if you have some time to browse and have a look at the themes in which we are working on and publishing. I think this is what I have to say in a nutshell, how I would describe the research environment in our school. I don't know, Rebecca, if you would like me to say also a few things about my research interests, or if you would like me to do that once others are sharing theirs.
Yes, Anastasia, if you're able to wait until we get to that point a little bit later on, that'd be a great time to share that with you.
Of course. Any questions, please just let me know.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you so much, Anastasia. I am having problems sharing anything on the chat right now, but what I will do is anything that is shared on the chat, I'll include it in a follow-up to all of the attendees and registrants so that they've got all of those links and things as well. Perfect, thank you so much. And I will hand over to Katia now to talk a bit more about what's available for PhDs and what's going on campus.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. So I'm going to talk about the Human Rights Center, what the Human Rights Center offers. My name is Katia Al-Khatib, and I am a Senior Research Officer at the Human Rights Center. The Human Rights Center is housed within the law school. We are we're very famous Human Rights Center, and the center runs LLM programs, PhDs, and MA programs. What could be really of interest to you if your research has a human rights element to it, or it is actually based in human rights, I think the center would be a very thriving environment for you. So the center has multiple projects that operate under the umbrella of the center. One of them, for example, is the Armed Conflict Hub, which kind of is an interdisciplinary hub that has lots of members across departments in the university, and they all meet and kind of collaborate on issues related to armed conflict. We have also human rights and drug policy. We have human rights and business project. We have Essex Transitional Justice Network and multiple other projects. And these projects kind of do sometimes run events, and they have their own things going on. They have their own things going, and they'd be available to you. And those expertise would also be available to you if you'd like to meet with the members of these projects or be involved somehow, one way or another, in some of the activities that they have. The Human Rights Center also runs a summer school that could be of interest to you. The theme is usually I'm not sure what they are this year, but anyway, that would be available to you in time. We also have a speaker series. Our speaker series runs throughout the year, and it is an interdisciplinary series that address different issues related to human rights. Again, across different disciplines. It could be from a legal point of view, from a sociological point of view, from a political science point of view, sometimes both. Our last one was on human rights and the arts, for example. So you would find what scratches your itch one way or another if you are interested in this. We also have a blog, a Human Rights Center blog, and it is a platform available for those who are interested in writing something on an ongoing issue or in human rights. We also have available opportunities for collaborating with others. So I'm gonna introduce another role I have with the school that is a different hat, and it's the PGR coordinator. I also have the role of kind of matchmaking. So if we have kind of a database of our PhD students, and we share this with our staff, and sometimes our staff needs somebody to assist them in a research or in running an event, and they have access to that. So I'm that focal point between the PhD students and the other academic staff. So if you need anything from anyone, I could be your person. That's it from me for now. I guess I'll speak to you later. Bye.
Thank you so much, Katia. And now, Joel, finally to you. We keep trying to put you in earlier.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Yes, so as I said before, my name is Joel Colon Rios. I am one of the lecturers here, and my area is probably public law, but most of my work is on constitutional theory. And I mean, I may say something else later on during the introductions, but what I wanted to do for the next few minutes was to talk a little bit about the process for applying for a PhD. And even though I may use mostly the Essex application process as an example, most universities have processes which are in many ways similar. So this will be relevant to you, whether you apply here or you apply somewhere else. So generally speaking, in terms of, I'll first say something about the sort of the formal or administrative aspects of the process, and then I will talk about the content of a PhD application, and give you some tips about that, and the tips or the advice that's very personal to me. So people may disagree, and of course other colleagues are welcome to jump in if they have additional things to say about that. So in terms of the formal process, and this applies to the ordinary PhD, the PhD in law or the PhD in human rights, not to we have something called the PhD by publication, which is a different route to obtaining a PhD. And if people have questions about that, I'm happy for them to write to me or to ask later on. But I'll be focusing on the ordinary PhD process application. So the sort of the formal part of the process, it has two main parts, and this is like this in many universities. So the first part of the process, when you apply, it's dealt with by the central university, and this is where the university determines whether you meet the basic requirements. Could be requirements about language, requirements about degrees that you need to apply for the PhD, or any other requirement established by the university. And the reason I mentioned that is that if one of those requirements is not met, then your application may never reach the department. So it may be rejected at that level. So that's why it's quite important that you could have a really strong proposal, but if you don't meet some of those basic requirements, we may never see it. So it's quite important to make sure that you understand what the eligibility requirements are, and explain how you meet them, so that your application goes to the second part of the process, which is the one that takes place at a departmental or faculty level, depending on the university we are talking about. So here we have the School of Law, it's the Department of Law, and what will happen is that after that application goes through the central process, then it comes to the law school, and here it is received by the PGR director, which in this case it's either me or the deputy PGR director, who is Mario Kotsias, who couldn't join us today. And then what we do then is to we look at the application, and then we decide whether we have someone who could supervise your project. And here at the law school, we normally assign 2 supervisors or potential 2 supervisors to each proposal. But before we do that, the PGR director, what they do is that they look at the they focus on the proposal usually. And if the proposal, for example, doesn't seem to be really about law, or the proposal has some other issues that the PGR director, even though they may not be an expert in the area, they think it's not at the right quality, they may decide not to offer admission at that stage. So that's something quite important. You know, if you, other aspects of your application could be very strong, but if your proposal is not the type of proposal that we want to see, and I will say something about that soon, then it may stay with the PGR director. So you want the proposal to actually be as strong as possible to get to the next stage, which is when the supervisors look at your, or potential supervisors look at your application. And they look at the entire application, and normally what you would be asked is to provide, you know, in addition to the research proposal, you're normally asked to produce or to submit a personal statement, a CV, letters of reference. Sometimes it could be 2, could be 3. Sometimes you're not asked for them until later on in the process, you know, in some universities, and also a writing sample. And in my experience, and this is one of my sort of, I said I was going to say some things that are just based on my own experience, is that the most important things at this stage are the proposal and the CV. The proposal and the CV. This is, I think, in general, in my experience, what supervisors really look at this stage. Which means that if your proposal is not very strong, or if you have a weak proposal, then it may not be enough for you to have very strong letters of recommendation, because at this stage the proposal becomes really the center, and then the supervisor will also pay a lot of attention to your CV, particularly if you have publications, or if you have papers that have not been published, but that you've research papers, you can include those in your CV. So just to give evidence that you have written before in you know, academic papers before. This could be your master's thesis or even undergraduate papers that you think are strong research pieces. And of course, one of those you would also submit as a writing sample. In terms of the writing sample, one thing that I would say is that it's I would encourage you, when you apply for the PhD, to try not to submit even if it's a published piece. If it is co-authored, then I would either not submit that one or submit it, but also submit something that you have written yourself. Because I've seen sometimes when there are questions about whether to, you know, we are on the fence on a particular application, then you know, if the writing sample is co-authored, sometimes you could say, well, we would like to see a sort of, you know, a sole authored piece before we can make a decision. Sometimes you could be asked for that later on in the process, but just to present the strongest application possible from the beginning, I would, if you have a co-authored piece, I would supplement it with a sole authored one, even if the second one is a draft or an unpublished manuscript. And then what happens is that after, so the supervisors look at the proposal, at your CV, at all the application, at every part of the application, and then they may decide to interview you. Here at Essex, we interview almost all students. And in the interview, we get to know you a bit better. Sometimes we may ask you questions about your proposal. Sometimes if we had questions, things that we didn't understand, we may seek to clarify those things. And then after the interview, you may get an offer of admission. You may be asked to revise your proposal. This sometimes happens. We think there is potential, but we would like to see some improvements, some clarification. So we may ask you to revise your proposal. We may also ask you to revise your proposal before the interview. Or we might decide that not to make an offer. And when that happens, it may be, sometimes it is just that we think that we are not the best place to supervise your work. If you're working on public law, that would probably never happen, because we have you know, I think we cover all areas of public law very well. But sometimes you know, there are always topics that sometimes just fall outside everyone's areas of interest, and we just cannot find a supervisor. So sometimes proposals or applications could be rejected on that basis. Sometimes, I mean, there may be other issues, but in general, I hope everyone here either gets an offer or is asked to resubmit their proposal. Now, let me just briefly say something about the proposal. So the proposal is really an opportunity to show us that you can write clearly and that you can come up with a structured plan for a research project. This is what we want to see. You know, we know that the proposal and your project may change after you come here. It may change a bit. The direction may move one way or the other. But we want to see that you can communicate clearly ideas about a research project. And we want you to show that you are already familiar with the general literature on the area you are working on. Because in the end, and you have heard this many times, your project would, you know, the phrase people use is fill a gap or contribute to the literature. So a research proposal, in a way, to sort of write a very good research proposal, you have to do research before that, because your proposal should have footnotes, should have references that show that, you know, you are able to make a contribution to the literature because you already know the literature and you have identified an aspect or a question that you think the literature hasn't answered already. And that would, of course, be your research question. So the PhD, in a way, is not, I mean, you will learn a lot while doing your PhD. So it's about learning, but it's also about producing new knowledge. And that's part of what we want to see in your proposal, that you have already the basis and an idea that would contribute to knowledge. Generally speaking, a proposal should be around 1,500 to 2,000 words. So it's not a very long document. It should also contain, as I said, references and a bibliography. And in general, we say, and I will put a link in the chat after I finish, with a document we have prepared in the law school that gives you some more specific guidance about preparing a proposal. But in general, it should have a title. You know, every time you write a proposal, you should title it. Like, it shouldn't be a PhD proposal. You know, it should have a title that suggests what the topic is. It should have an introduction, right? Where you clearly identify from the very beginning the problem that your project will address. This is quite important. And, you know, that from the very beginning, we know, okay, so this candidate has identified, could be a social problem that the law fails to address, or it could be a problem in terms of a new legal development that doesn't seem to fit with what already exists. Could be that a law has been adopted that is in tension with a principle that you think is very important in the legal system, but you must identify the problem that your research project will address. And then, so you have the title, the introduction, then the research question. And the research question has to be an actual question. And this is, sometimes it's the hardest part of the proposal to write. And even after you come to the PhD program, your research question will probably change. But the important thing, I would say, is that the research question has to be not only a question, but it has to be like an honest question. It has to be a question that you don't know the answer to. If you already know the answer to the question, it's because, I mean, if you already know the answer, then it means that you don't need to do a PhD to answer it, and probably that someone else has written about this and so on. So your research question should be a question that hasn't been answered before, or if it has been answered, and perhaps you think, well, this has been answered, but not in the right way, then you need to tell us why. And then after the research question, you will normally have a literature review. And of course, it will not be the full literature review that you will have in your thesis, but it has to be a literature review that shows us that you already are familiar with the literature, and that shows that your research question has not been answered by the literature. That shows that you're actually adding something to the literature. You will add something to the literature by answering that or engaging with that research question. Then you should include, of course, a methodology section. And here, what I would say is that what really matters, this sometimes doesn't have to be very long, actually, for a proposal, but what really matters is that the methods are the methods that you can show that the methods are the right methods to answer the research question that you have. One thing that I have seen in many proposals recently is that they list many methods. They say, I want to do interviews, I want to do focus groups, I want to do doctrinal research, I want to do comparative legal research. And sometimes I say, but why are you doing focus groups? You know, this is actually a doctrinal research. You can answer this question just through doctrinal research. And there sometimes is the idea that the more methods, the sort of the strongest the proposal is. And it's not that way at all. Sometimes you just need one method and you just do it. You need to do it well because that's the method that will help you to answer the research question. And at the end, after the methodology, we normally like to see a timeline and a chapter outline, which just gives a rough idea of how are you thinking about the structure of the thesis, and what is your timeline in terms of, you know, so which chapters will you write in your first year, in your second year, and so on. And then it's always good to include at the end of the proposal, usually, could be in a different place, but it's normally at the end, a statement about why the department you're applying to is the best place to do this research. You could there refer to the fact that, you know, in this department, there are academics working on this very topic. Or you could, if you are doing, say, a human rights thesis in Essex, you say because of the Human Rights Center, you know, you have to show that you're not just applying to, even if it's, I mean, it could be Essex or somewhere else, but, you know, there must be a reason, or you should show that there's a reason why you think that's the right place for you. Okay, so that's about the content of the proposal. Then finally, I wanted to say a couple of things. I wanted to say something about supervisors, and also something about funding. And then I will pass I will pass the Zoom back to Rebecca. So most universities, or at least a good number of universities, including Essex, they encourage prospective applicants to contact supervisors before applying. And this is not a requirement, but it's, you know, you're encouraged to do this. And there are some good reasons for that. You know, if you make contact with a supervisor and they say, yeah, this is very interesting, I would like to I would be open to supervise that, you should apply, and so on. What normally happens is that supervisor emails the PGR director and says, you know, I talked to the student when the application comes, can you please send it to me? And if that happens, you're already sort of almost in, you know, it's like, yeah, that's very good. I mean, different things could happen, but that's a very good thing. And normally you don't know about this because it happens internally, but that's one of the reasons why it's a good idea to contact supervisors before applying. That doesn't mean that you always have to do this. And we have very good students and excellent students and that have gotten into the program without contacting a supervisor before coming, but sometimes that helps. Now, if you decide to contact a supervisor, what I would make sure is, I mean, I would say a few things. First, do not contact everyone. I mean, that's an exaggeration, even though it could actually happen, but just look very carefully at our profiles and see who do you think would be, you know, who's working on a topic that is very close to yours. And even better, read some of their work. I mean, you may already know their work, but if not, read their work. And then when you write that email, instead of saying, write a very generic email saying, you know, this is my topic, I would like to work with you, would you be interested in supervising me? You can say, you know, I've read your article on this and that, and I found it interesting. I think it resonated with some of my own views. This is my idea for the PhD. That's the way of, you know, if you approach a supervisor that way, I think the chances to get a positive response or a response are much higher than if you send an email, generic email that sometimes we're not sure, you know, was this addressed to me or or was this sent to many other people? And then because we received many emails, sometimes things get lost and so on. So that would be my advice on that front. Now, in terms of funding, and I will post a link put a link in the chat very shortly. Essex is part of two consortia of universities in the United Kingdom that have come together to provide scholarships through very competitive processes, but processes that are there and that are open for you to apply. And these are CAJI and SENS. And I will not talk a lot about them, but if you have more questions, it happens that I am the contact person for SENS and CAJI in the law school, so I'm happy to receive emails about that. And I will post a link with a blog post we recently put together with more information about these funding opportunities. One interesting thing about them is that you normally can apply to do an LLM, or there's a possibility for applying to do an LLM and a PhD and get funding for both. And these schemes, they not only provide funding, but also they're actually called doctoral training programs, and they provide opportunities for different types of training. So there are quite good programs to be part of. There is also we have in the website something called the Scholarship Finder, because there are other scholarships that are available sometimes through the university, sometimes through external sources, usually associated with particular areas or groups, and I will send a document that has a link to that as well. And then one thing to also have in mind is that some governments are increasingly establishing programs that fund PhD students that are pursuing PhD degrees overseas. So SENS and CAJI are actually open to international students, I forgot to say, but if you are based in a foreign country, also have a look at those, at what your own governments offer, because sometimes there are things that we, in my case, myself, there was a very good scholarship offered by the Supreme Court that I didn't know about until I finished my PhD, and things would have been a lot easier if I had, maybe I wouldn't have gotten it, but I didn't know it existed. So these things sometimes exist, and it's good to make sure we are aware of them. I think I covered everything. Rebecca, is there anything I should say, do you think?
No, I think that covered everything that we sort of had in our list. That was quite a lot of information, Joel. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so sorry if it was too much. I just tried to.
No, I think it covered quite a lot, and it was really helpful as well, because when I applied, I'm not sure, Tatjana, your process, but when I applied for my PhD, I went direct to a supervisor and identified a supervisor and contacted them in advance saying, this is my idea, this is what I'm thinking about. And there was a bit of to and froing that meant when I actually submitted my application, I didn't actually have an interview with the University of Essex because I'd already built up that research working relationship. I don't know, Tatjana, if you had the same experience.
Yes, for me, it was very similar. I saw my supervisor's profile, I thought that was a really good fit, reached out to him directly, and then the rest, was just kind of, I don't want to say formalities, but that is basically how I started it.
Lovely, thank you. So I think next on our list, we were going to have some of our academic staff introduce themselves in their area of research just very briefly, so that attendees can see what potential supervisors we have. Now, I know some people are only available because they're going off to teach. So Calder, I think if I come to you first, because I know you have to leave in the next sort of 10 minutes.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. It's great to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Calder Castle. I'm a senior lecturer in human rights at the school and the Human Rights Center. I do mostly issues that have to do with what we call ESCR, socioeconomic rights, so housing, health, education, social security, and so on. And I think I would like to stress 4 possible topics that I would be really keen to work on with some of you if you're interested. So let me just mention what they are. The first one is the issue of incorporation of international human rights treaties. So as you know, countries tend to sign and ratify multiple treaties, but then they tend to be slower when it comes to making them meaningful at the local level, at the national level, in domestic legislation. So I'm interested in learning about how different countries institutionalized mechanisms to hold public authorities to account vis-a-vis these rights, in particular in relation to socioeconomic rights. So there are models out there of different ways of holding public authorities to account. There are certain models that are considered golden star, and I am interested in learning whether they are really so golden and whether we can replicate them if they happen to be so. So that's one topic, incorporation of international treaties and at the national level. The second one is about the power of judges in relation to socioeconomic rights. So for the last 25 years or so, there've been increasing recognition of justiciability of socioeconomic rights. So judicial enforceability of socioeconomic rights. Probably the first most salient case is Group Boom from the year 2000 in South Africa in relation to a right to housing, but there are many others. But kind of the year 2000 for me is kind of a milestone in this regard. Since then, there have been many examples out there of judicial enforceability of socioeconomic rights, but most of these examples have to do with the negative dimension of rights, issues such as evictions, so protecting individuals from public authorities that evict them. So it's about preventing the state from doing something that interferes with the right to housing in this case. There have been a few cases that have to do with non-retrogression, which is taking steps backwards in the protection of rights. But I'm interested in whether there are examples out there of progressive realization. So this is a question of how much judges should go in urging public authorities to do something to progressively realize the enjoyment of rights. There are not that many cases out there, as far as I know, and I've been collaborating with people in other universities to try to find out whether there are examples there. There are not that many, so I'm interested in knowing why there are not that many, and what it tells us about how we formulate human rights and how much we can expect from them. The third issue is the issue of localizing human rights. So it's about bringing human rights down to earth at a very local level, so not in national policy and legislation, but at the more local authority level, municipalities in other countries, local community groups, and so on. And one of the projects that Katja mentioned from the Human Rights Center is called Human Rights Local, that I've been running for 4 years or so, and is precisely about this, about making human rights locally relevant. I will provide a link in a moment. And then fourthly is the issue of the tension between property and social rights is what I'm working on at the moment in relation to working on a book about the tension that exists between individual property rights and social rights like a housing, like social security, like education. How far can we go in interfering in regulating private property rights, in setting limits to private property rights in order to fulfill the social rights that are recognized in domestic law nationally and internationally. So I'll stop there. If anyone wants to discuss any of these topics, I will put my email there in the chat, and also we provide a link to the Human Rights Local project as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Caldo. Anastasia, if I come to you next, because I know you also have to shoot off.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. So yeah, I have 2 key areas of research interest. And in my view, both are related to public law, which is the focus of maybe today's talk, in one way or another. So my first area of research has to do with democracy and citizens' participation, especially in the European Union, but also at the national level. At the moment, I'm working on a research project that is funded by the European Union on creative inclusive citizens' assemblies. So we call these innovative mechanisms in which citizens can participate into public decision making. I've done research on the European Citizens Initiative, so another way in which citizens can have a say in decision making and lawmaking. And I'm broadly interested in these themes. So how can citizens have a voice in the legislation making process and in public decision making? My other area of research interest has to do with finance law. So I jokingly say that when I get bored of the one, I go to the other, and then I go back to the other one. So I do research on mainly EU finance law or banking law. I'm interested in banking supervision and regulation. I'm interested in in the ways in which the regulators and the supervisors are accountable for their actions when they are supervising financial institutions. I'm interested in money laundering as well. I mainly approach these topics from a European Union perspective, but I welcome approaches from various different methodological perspectives and at various different levels of inquiry. So if you are interested in any of those topics, democratic participation on the one hand, EU finance and banking regulation and supervision on the other hand, let's have a chat. I think Rebecca has will circulate a list with our details, but you can also find my profile in the Essex Law School web pages, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Anastasia. Yes, after today's session, I will circulate with all of the registrants and attendees sort of a summary of all of the staff members and their areas of interest, and also a link to their profiles and email addresses and things, so everybody will be able to get to be contacted from there. Lovely. I think I also have Nikos, you're leaving soon, but I'm not sure, are you? Yes, lovely.
Oh, thanks very much. It's a great initiative, and it's a great opportunity to discuss the PhD, because I think there might be a lot of questions and uncertainties for all of us as we start this journey. So if we could attend one of these sessions, I think we would. It would have really been useful for us. But I just want to to briefly introduce. I mean, I'm also based at Essex Law School. I teach public law and human rights related modules here. If you are an undergraduate student or even an LLM student in Essex, maybe you have had a public law lecture with me probably over the last years. I don't know. But I would like to mention, in terms of PhD supervision, maybe 3 topics that I'm currently working on. My initial work had more to do with the European Union, but I think I have probably moved a little bit from EU-related matters. So the 3 topics I would like to mention is, first, I will frame it as 4th branch institutions. That would be, and I will say a couple of words for each one of them. Secondly, I would mention selected areas of the European Convention on Human Rights. And thirdly, I will say a few words about the Council of Europe, so beyond the European Convention on Human Rights, and also questions related to the institutional setup of international organizations. So I will try to explain what I mean in a moment. So 4th branch institutions, I think I have done some work in the past, and I'm keen to carry on working on institutions that, as you may know, cannot be easily classified in the sort of more traditional separation of powers thinking, which has, the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. So I'm thinking here mainly of ombuds offices, audit institutions, data protection authorities, and so on and so forth. So questions around, the mandate of these institutions, their contribution to accountability, maybe transparency considerations, so on and so forth, are of particular interest to me. So that would be one topic. Regarding the law of the European Convention on Human Rights, or ECHR, as sometimes referred to, obviously, as you know, in Essex, we have a lot of colleagues working on human rights more generally, so not just on the ECHR. But in my case, I would say that I'm really interested in questions of reform of the convention system, and also in questions of admissibility, which sometimes might be quite a technical topic, and maybe also political rights that stem from the European Convention on Human Rights. So, in particular, how the court has interpreted specific rights, for example, the right to vote, among others. And so the third topic, I have an ongoing book project and a Humboldt Fellowship, and I'm working on an institution that I'm sure you probably haven't heard of, and that's okay. You will not be the first ones. the Administrative Tribunal of the Council of Europe. But what I want to share with you is that through the work of this tribunal, I have also looked at questions of administrative and institutional setup within the organization. I mean, this tribunal has jurisdiction to adjudicate on staff disputes, but when you adjudicate on staff disputes, or when a tribunal adjudicates on staff disputes, that tribunal necessarily will have a look at the internal arrangements and the administrative setup of an institution. So as I'm trying to contextualize this discussion, I have developed an interest in the question of administrative setup of international organizations, institutional balance, and so on and so forth. So if that might be of interest to you, you know, you can drop me an email and we can discuss. Yeah, happy to answer any questions by email. Rebecca will helpfully share our contact details. That's all from me. And thanks again to Rebecca and everyone else for taking the initiative to organize this. That's great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Nikos. Katja, did you have to shoot off as well?
That would be great. Thank you, Rebecca. Hi again. Well, my work is a bit mixed because my interest is at the intersection of international law and armed conflict, and that sometimes takes me to different places, particularly IHL issues and transitional justice issues. So you would find some of my work related to IHL only and some related to IHL and transitional justice. In IHL only, I'm really interested in modern technology that has not yet been implemented, but it is on the way of being implemented. So I've worked on human enhancement technologies in the military, and that includes brain-computer interfaces, performance enhancement drugs, prosthetic arms that could fire, basically. This is the kind of technology I'm interested in and its application, the potential application in the military. So what I try to see in this is just examine what are the potential violations of international humanitarian law implementing this technology could actually lead us to. And before we implement it, what are the things that we can do in order to avoid these potential violations? It would be a set of kind of issues that we need to configure while we are developing these technologies and before we put it out there in the market. So it's a precautionary kind of approach to technologies in the military. And when it comes to transitional justice, as many of you who have interest, particularly have interest in transitional justice, you know that this is actually, there is no one size fits all in transitional justice research. And when I say transitional justice, I mean transitioning political systems after a prolonged time of armed conflict. So transitioning from one political system to the next and all the set of issues that come along with that. There is no one size fits all in transitional justice. Everything has to be rethought and tailored to its particular, to the context of that conflict per se. Right now, I'm working on finalizing a transitional justice report on Syria. It's about 8,000 words kind of report, and we'll be releasing it hopefully next week. If you want to have a look at it, it would be great. The other thing that I'm also interested in, that's kind of my hobby because I have an interdisciplinary background. And for those of you who have that interest, I'm more than happy to have a discussion with you, is kind of integrating the arts into human rights research. And this is partly why I'm interested also in transitional justice, because one of the issues we do in transitional justice is integrating different artistic approaches to transition, peace building, and reconciliation. So I teach also on human rights in the arts module. And I am interested in looking into these artistic expressions in every way or form, film, literature, blogs, videos, all of it, and how the ways in which this could actually kind of help and assist our legal inquiry, if it does, and in which ways, what way it could do that. I probably did not mention what I teach on. I teach on current issues of armed conflict. I teach on public international law, some modules in the MA as well. And that's about it for now, I think. If you are interested in any of those issues, I'd be more than happy to have a chat with you and collaborate on your proposal.
Perfect. Thank you, Tatjana. I'm just going to move around my screen now because I think that was everybody who had to go off and teach. So, Isolt.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for organizing this discussion presentations. So hello, everybody. I'm Izumarike and I'm professor of law here at Essex. I'm mostly interested in the interfaces of administrative law between different kind of topics. So I'm doing some research on transnational administrative law. So what happens when an administrative decision has effect elsewhere than in the territory of the state taking these decisions, for instance. Is it possible and how does it happen? A second aspect of my interfacing approach to administrative law is comparative law in various ways, and I'm involved in at least one comparative law research on judicial review with Professor Sunkin, also here today. And I'm also interested in the interactions between public and private, or the economic and public actors. And this translates in a series of topics that I'm working on. One is public finances. I'm actually looking at the economic union, the European Economic Union in certain aspect. And one of the topics I'm researching for the moment is independent fiscal bodies, so different bodies which can provide information about the state of the budget, the deficit and the debts, and what happens with that. In the UK, we had a big problem with the lack of intervention of such a body when Liz Truss did not ask it. So we see that this kind of bodies has some kind of influence on the state, the budget or the debt that a state can undertake. And I'm not necessarily looking only at the UK. There are a number of these bodies, and there are some principles applicable to them that I'm trying to look at. The second types of field that I'm developing, interested in, is local government, and especially their self-government, if they have any. So I'm looking at the Charter of Self-Government, which is a Council of Europe charter, but also how and when local government contract out, what are the judicial review, the procurement principle that apply to them. And procurement is a topic that is moving very much for the moment, with a new act coming into force in a couple of months now from there. And I'm interested in what happens from the previous system to the new system that will come in place. What are the differences that will emerge from that? And the third field that I'm looking into are principle of good administration, mostly those developed by the Council of Europe, which is not a very well-known part of the activities of the Council of Europe, but actually there is lots of soft law that has been developed by the Council of Europe. And I'm also looking at specific principles, in particular bias and impartiality. So I'm saying that, but obviously there are ways in which this research topic can be expanded or connected to other research questions, but I'm very happy to discuss things with anybody interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Isolt. I think next on my screen is Essen.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. My research is broadly about European public law. I focus more on asylum and migration under that. Most of my writing was about the use of solidarity principle in this specific area. But I also am interested in general, asylum and migration management in the EU, and that includes the new pact on asylum and migration. I'm also interested in the temporary protection directive, its implementation. And within that, I also look at different jurisdictions, for example, Turkey, where I'm originally coming from, how asylum and migration is regulated and managed within the specific context of temporary protection. And lately, I also took interest in the use of new technologies and the AI, especially in the asylum migration management. And with that, I'm mostly focusing on Turkey at the moment. Another strand of my research took off from the concept of solidarity in asylum migration. I moved a little bit to EU constitutional law within this specific topic to look at how principles and values are used, their justiciability, implementation. So I'm also interested in the judicial review process and also the different dimensions of solidarity. So I recently wrote about the use of this concept within the specific context of data sharing. I'm also interested in how this principle is used in the energy and other sectors like security. But in general, I think they all go under the public law, and hence I'm affiliated with the CAJI at Essex. And I am supervising currently 2 students. They are research focusing on asylum migration, and there is EU. One of them is focused on the EU specifically, and the other one has aspect to EU law. So yeah, any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Demetrio.
Hi everyone. My name is Dimitris Kiritis, and I'm a reader at the law school, and most of my research is, a good part of my research is at the intersection of public law and philosophy. So I have a separate interest in legal philosophy, but as far as public law is concerned, my interest is with bringing philosophy, especially political philosophy, to bear on the study of public law. And so, if there's anyone among you who has this specific methodological approach in mind to applying their PhD, that's something that I would be happy to help with. More specifically, in terms of substantive subjects that I explore in my research, I have a broad interest in questions of constitutionalism. So what it means, how we can best construe constitutionalism in a way that responds to contemporary challenges as well as perennial challenges. Separation of powers. So my second monograph was on the concept of separation of powers as a key concept in understanding constitutional review of primary legislation, and proportionality, especially as it applies to the human rights law. As far as jurisdictions are concerned, so my main focus has been on the UK and other English-speaking jurisdictions, but because of my emphasis is on philosophical exploration of public law issues, I'm happy to look at other jurisdictions as well, or to supervise projects that focus on a specific jurisdiction that I'm not familiar with, but with that more philosophical or moral angle, and also the EU and the Strasbourg system. So if there are some among you who have that kind of more foundational interest in public law issues, especially constitutional law issues and human rights issues, then I'd be happy to support your PhDs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitrios. Tom, if I come to you next.
Certainly. Hi. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, everyone. My name is Tom Flynn. I'm a lecturer at Essex Law School, and my research historically has focused on constitutional law broadly speaking, but specifically in the context of EU constitutionalism and the relationship of the EU legal order with the legal orders of the member states, or more specifically, the EU constitutional order and the constitutional orders of the member states, along with the convention system taken together. I'm particularly interested in that general area, the area of constitutional pluralism within the European Union. I am also interested in the constitutional law and constitutional history of the United Kingdom, particularly as regards the territorial constitution, devolution, and imperial constitutional history. I do occasionally moonlight also as a legal theorist and someone with an interest in law and literature, particularly as regards constitutionalism in science fiction. I realize that this is going to be a very short self-bio in comparison to some of the previous contributions, but I'm very much open for applications from prospective candidates in the area of constitutionalism, broadly speaking. As was the case with Dimitrios, I'm perfectly open to applications regarding a jurisdiction with which I'm not familiar, as long as I could provide some kind of expertise on the theoretical side rather than the specific doctrinal side. And one project I'm working on at the moment is I have some funding from the British Academy for a conference I'm organising in April next year in Belfast on the idea of the principle of parity of esteem in the Good Friday Agreement, specifically as a constitutional principle, and the idea that the state needs to valorize both loyalty to the state and what could be construed as disloyalty to the state at the same time, which I think is an unusual and interesting and understudied question. So in that context, that opens up ideas such as nationality, nationalism, identity, belonging, plurinationalism, and their relation with constitutionalism. So I'm also particularly interested in hearing from people who'd like to work in those areas too. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. Richard, if we come to you next.
Hi, yes, I'm Richard Corns, originally from New Zealand, been in the UK since 1998. And I'm here to speak partly for myself and partly for the law and psychoanalysis and psychosocial studies developments at Essex. My current research, and I'm interested in people who might be interested in, is about court reform. Originally, I was involved with Andrew Swear, who's one of our other public law colleagues who can't be here today. Andrew and I did work on the creation of the Supreme Court. I'm now interested in therapeutic justice, court reform at the first instance level, how courts, criminal courts in particular, might operate more therapeutically and not simply process people through to prisons. I come at that with colleagues from the Centre, from the Department for Psychosocial and Psychoanalytic Studies, and we have a new cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary link with them, looking at law and social phenomena. So we're also interested in law and psychoanalysis more generally, and organizational developments. Finally, I was fascinated to hear about Katja's interest in the arts, and I wasn't going to mention it until I discovered that there's another colleague who's doing interesting work on using innovative research methods. In our law and psychosocial phenomena field, we're interested in developing methodologies, psychosocial methodologies, and one of those is using drawing and art in institutional observations. So going into, for instance, courts and using drawing techniques to observe courts to try and understand not only what's happening as a lawyer, but also what's happening in the court's unconscious, to try and get a better sense of how courts operate and how they might operate better. Thanks for your attention. Bye.
Thank you, Richard. Alexandros.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. I'm a researcher here at the University of Essex, and I also teach and research media and communications law, broadly conceived. I suppose part of that broader field pertains to criminal law as a branch of public law. So specifically, I'm looking at issues around cyber obscenity, specifically into cybercrime and offensive content, obscene publications, the legal control of image-based sexual abuse. There is at the moment a bill, a private member's bill that goes through the UK Parliament, which looks at the criminalization of non-consensually sexually explicit images and videos, including deepfakes, for instance, which might be a very fertile ground for new research areas for people who might want to look at. But aside from that, I also research intellectual property asset management, issues around media regulation with a specific interest in advertising regulation and influencers. And I would welcome supervision in these areas. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And then that brings us, Julia's on my screen, but I know she's signed off, so I think that's a glitch. So if we come back to the CAJI members, so we'll Maurice, would you like to go next?
Oh, no, thanks. Actually, I said something very briefly about my research interests. I mean, given the time and perhaps, you know, give the attendees an opportunity to ask us some questions and get some discussion going, maybe I won't say anything more. Just to reiterate the range of interests I have in judicial review. But if you don't mind, I'll just pass on that. And if there's any particular questions, I'm of course really very happy to answer them, or anybody can contact me if they've got particular interests that might match my interests. If that's okay, Rebecca.
Lovely. Thank you, Maurice. Joelle, Theodore, are you going to do the same thing, or would you like to have a quick?
I can do the same thing.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.